Hi everybody, welcome to our live event. My name is Brenda K.B. and I'm a crochet designer and a crochet teacher at the Creative Crochet Corner website and also on Craftsy and various other places. I am very excited today to be working on this project. It's called the Moxie Scarflette, and this is what it looks like. Here's my little buddy here, my little model. It is just a very small little scarf that you tie around your neck, and actually I'll pull it off here so you guys can see it up close here and overhead. It's just a very small little scarflette that you tie around your neck so that it stays in place, but it is just basically like a long, thin strip and it goes kind of down to little points at each end. It is a very simple project to do, and the inspiration behind this project was the yarn. So I don't know about you guys, but I really love hand-dyed yarns, and I have this tendency to just buy one skein of it sometimes. I don't necessarily have a plan of what it's for. I'll figure that out later, but that's what this pattern is designed for. It's for all those little exciting little, one skein purchases, and then you're not quite sure what you want to do with it. So it uses a small amount of yarn, and it's also very adaptable to different thicknesses of yarn, and I'll talk about that a little bit in our live event. Yeah, so this is kind of all centered around this gorgeous yarn. Before we get any further, I want to mention there is a free pattern to go along with this for the Moxie Scarflette, and also this is a live event, so please say hi, let me know where you're crocheting from, let me know if you've ever used hand-dyed yarns before. I'm curious, or if you have had any troubles with them in the past. Like sometimes I know that people sometimes are worried about trying out hand-dyed yarns because they're worried that they can't imagine what it's going to look like when they crochet it up. There's a difference between seeing it in the skein and then seeing it when you work it up into those stitches. And I think sometimes that makes people hesitate, but you shouldn't, because hand-dyed yarns are such a fun way to add a little extra visual interest and personality to your projects, and I highly recommend trying them out because they're just a lot of fun, and it's great when you're stitching along and the color changes as you go. It just feels like a fresh project the whole time you're working on it. You don't get sick of it. There's a lot of reasons I love them, but anyway, of course, live event, definitely put questions in the chat if you have any questions, if you have any comments. Put those in there too. I'll be answering your questions during this live event, in case anything would come up that you want me to go over again, or you missed something or whatever. So let me know. Okay, so let me first just talk just a little bit about the dyer. I came across, this is from the dye shop of Cheryl Cox. She is the mastermind behind the Essence of Autumn yarn. That's the brand of the yarn. And I first came across her because I was looking at YouTube videos on dyeing yarn, and I came across her channel, and I was just so impressed with the colors that she had. I don't know, I went to her website and I was just scrolling, looking through everything, and just the combinations she puts together are just so beautiful. And yeah, I just fell in love with her yarns, so I knew that I had to do something involving these yarns. I wanted to make a small project basically centered around these yarns. So here it is. I did put a link to her business, to her Etsy page, and also to her website. There's also a link to her YouTube channel if you want to check out, if you want to see her in action dyeing yarn. She's does some really, really great tutorials on hand dyeing your own yarn. It's just really interesting to see her process, and she's just a delight to watch. So I highly recommend checking her out. But of course, this is meant to be sort of more of a universal pattern. You can use it for other yarns. You can easily substitute, other hand-dyed yarns, or even solid colors if you want to. I don't want to, although this was planned around sort of a variegated colorway, color-changing yarn, it still looks really cool in a solid color as well, because there's enough visual interest. So don't shy away from that. If multiple colors in a project are not for you, you can definitely still make this. It'll be really cute. All right. So, of course, let's talk about the materials first. Of course, you're going to need your yarn. So I just used one skein in this project, and I had enough left over to do something else with. I'm not really sure what, but I'm definitely hanging on to this for something else. But this was how much yarn I had left. after working up my scarflette. And let me just tell you the yardage here. Let's see. In your pattern, you'll get all that information, where to find the yarn, what weight it is and all that. This is a Sport DK, so it's kind of in between. And I needed about 185 yards for this project. The skein comes with 256 yards, so there is that leftover amount there. I will also be using an F hook, which is a 3.75 millimeter hook, but you can use whatever hook, either gets you the same gauge as what I have listed in my pattern, which we'll talk about in a little bit, or you can use whatever hook makes your yarn have the fabric that you want it to have, because this is a pattern that you can very easily just kind of change it up depending on how thick your yarn is and how it's working up, and you can do that as you go. You don't have to plan anything ahead of time. There's no math involved. It's wonderful. Okay, so, and then besides that, just a yarn needle to weave in your ends, and then I would recommend 2 removable stitch markers, and those are going to help you keep track of the ends of your rows. And you might think, Brenda, I don't need that. I've been crocheting for years. But with this stitch pattern, and also with variegated yarn, it might be really hard to see some of the stitches on the ends of your rows. And we'll talk a little more about that as we work our way through, but there's a couple of stitches in here that are harder to see, like at the beginning and the end of the row. So we'll talk about that as we go. Okay, so let's see. There are some interesting little variations of stitches in here. Okay, so then they're all listed on how to do them in your pattern, but I'm going to be going through everything also. Under the special stitches section, there's something called a beginning linked treble. So that would be a linked stitch that's just at the beginning of the row, and I'll teach you guys how to do that. And then another variation on doing that, but with a decrease. And then I do a different type of treble decrease than I was taught. And we'll get into that a little bit too as we work our way through and start decreasing for the second half of the scarf. But I just wanted to point these things out there because you may be reading through the pattern and like, what's a BLT? That sounds delicious. But it's a beginning linked treble, not a sandwich in this case. Okay, so, all right, let's get started on this. I'm going to use this colorway here. I'm trying to remember what this one was called. Oh, this one is called Marsh. And then the one that I have in the main photo, I think it's called Black Cherry. Yep, Black Cherry, the Black Cherry colorway. Here, I'll take this off so you guys can see a little bit more what this yarn looks like in case you're curious, the colors in it. And here's this one. This one's a little bit of a lighter color, but it's got some really nice dark rusty brown streaks in there. Alrighty. Okay, so we're going to start with chaining 2. So we're just going to put a slip knot on our hook. Oh, Christy is saying, is there any way you can tell what the colors will look like before you buy it? She has really great photos on her website of the yarn, and what I liked about it, I mean, multiple things, but I like that she had not only just what the skein looked like, but she also has what it looks like when you open it up. Here, I'm going to just show you. Like when you take a look at it like this, so you can really see all the different color variations. Her photos are great though. So sometimes it's a little hard to tell what things are going to look like, but her photos were beautiful. And when I received the yarn, I was very happy to see that it looked just as good, if not even better in person than what I could see in her photos. They're just really, really beautiful photos. So you should be able to see pretty well what your colors are going to be like. Okay. All right, so we're going to start by chaining 2, so 1 and 2, and here we're starting at one tip of the scarflette and working our way across to the other tip. That's how it's worked sideways, basically. Okay, so now we're going to do 2 half double crochets in the second chain from the loop, second chain from the hook, but we're going to work into the bottom of our chain. It actually doesn't matter if you work into the top. Nobody's going to tell. It's so tiny. But I like to work into the bottom. It just makes it a little tiny bit neater. So the bottom are these little dash lines here. If you look at the top, you can see those are little V's, kind of like this. And you just roll that over. Then there's those little dashes on the bottom. And I'm going to insert my hook under the second one from the hook. Okay, so there's the first one from the hook. Here's the second one. Just insert here. Oops, I got to yarn over first though, sorry. Yarn over and then insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over, and we're going to pull through all 3 loops on our hook. And that's the first stitch. That's a half double crochet. And we're going to add another half double crochet to that same spot, that same chain. So we're going to yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through all 3. So now we have 2 half double crochets. That little chain, so we chained 2, the second chain that we made, that doesn't count as a stitch. We're not going to work into that chain. All right, so now to work row number 2, we're going to make a turning chain. So we're just chaining 1, and then we're going to turn our work to work across the opposite way. I know this seems really crazy because this is so tiny, but we're working in rows here. And now we're going to do a slip stitch into each of the 2 half double crochets, but underneath the back loop. So normally we insert our hook underneath both loops like this, and this time we're going to insert our hook under just that back loop there. So we're going to yarn over, pull up a loop, and then we're going to pull that through the loop on our hook. And right there, that is the first stitch of the row. So I'm going to put a stitch marker in there, even though this is really tiny and it seems a little crazy. There we go. Now we have 1 more half double crochet, and we're going to do another slip stitch into the back loop. So there's our second stitch. We have 1 and 2. Now we're going to chain 4 because this is a turning chain, but also it's going to count as the first treble crochet of the row. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we're going to turn our work just like we're turning a little tiny page like that. We're going to work across the row in the opposite direction. And now we're going to do a treble crochet into each stitch. Now, as I said, this is counting as the first stitch. These 4 chains are counting as a treble crochet. Normally that means you would not work into that same stitch when you do your first stitch. Normally, if this counts as a stitch, you start working in this stitch, but we're actually increasing in the for the first half of the cowl, we're increasing. So we're going to work our first treble into the same stitch, into that very first stitch there. So we're going to yarn over twice, and then we're going to insert underneath both loops just like normal here. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So now we have 2 stitches. One was that chain 4, and this one, the second one, is that the first real treble that we did in this row. And now we've got 1 more stitch to work into, so we're going to yarn over twice. We're going to insert into that chain stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So now we have 3 treble stitches across. Okay, we just did an increase in that row. We had 2 stitches before, and now we have 3. Now we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. And we're going to do a slip stitch into the back loop of each stitch across. So here's the first stitch here. 1, 2, and remember that beginning chain 4 counted as a stitch, so we have to do a slip stitch into that stitch 2, and 3. Okay, and then we're going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and turn our work again. And now we're going to do a treble crochet into each stitch across, including that first stitch, because we're still increasing here. So the way that this scarf works out is that as you are, here, let me just pull this out here. As you are going from the tip of your scarf, where it's this is where we're starting out, where it's very skinny down here, and we're going to work our way up here. We're going back and forth in these turn rows. Every time you're working one of those treble crochet rows, you're always adding 1 extra stitch right at the beginning of the row. So you're increasing by 1 stitch on each treble row. Then when you're doing your the row after that with the slip stitches, you're just making a slip stitch into each stitch. So really you're only increasing every other row. So only on the treble rows are we increasing. It's a very slow increase, and that's what keeps it so long and narrow. And that makes it easy to tie around your neck, and it just has a really nice shape for that. Okay, so we're gonna yarn over twice, working into that very first stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So now we have that chain 4 that counts as a treble, and this treble, and then the next treble. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. That stitch was just a little tight. And then one more. So we always yarn over twice, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So in that row we had 4 treble stitches. So we're going to chain 1 and turn, and now we're going to slip stitch in the back loop of each stitch across. So whenever you're doing your slip stitch rows, you're working across just 1 stitch in each stitch, but you're making that slip stitch in the back loop of your stitch. And then whenever you're doing your treble rows, you start out with a chain 4, that counts as a treble, and then you add a treble to that same first stitch right there, and you're working under both loops, not under the back loop, okay? Just like working under both loops, just like you normally do. And one more. So this last little slip stitch can be kind of hard to see. So that's why, and I marked my stitch and then I promptly forgot to move my marker up. But that's why I would recommend putting a stitch marker in the first and last stitch of the rows. And this is kind of annoying at the beginning when you only have a few stitches across. But once you kind of start getting the hang of it, you might stop paying as much attention as to make sure that you really got worked into each one of those slip stitches, and you might start dropping stitches by accident or just, like skipping over them. So that's why I recommend putting a stitch marker in the first and last stitch. So we chain 1 and turn, and that chain 1 at the beginning of those slip stitch rows never counts as a stitch. Okay, so on the slip stitch rows, your beginning chain 1 does not count as a stitch, but on your treble rows, the first treble does count as a stitch. I hope this makes sense. All right, so now we're just doing slip stitches through that back loop, across, and into the top of that chain there. Okay, and if you're not sure if you've been working your stitches, if you've been missing any stitches, you can always count up your trebles and make sure it's increasing by 1 treble on each row. So that'll help you keep on track. All right, so you would just continue doing this for quite a while. Let's see. Let's see here. Okay. Up through row 57. And so the way that you can easily count your rows, if you're wondering about that, is when you see these ridges, that means if you can count by 2s. So actually they're even more prominent on this side. You can see, here I'll just pull this over so you can see. But every time you see a ridge, so this is 1 row, 2 rows, 1 row, 2 rows. You can count by 2s. Every time you see a ridge, you can just go, if you were starting at the beginning, which I am not because this is not finished, but you would go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, just count by 2s, and that way you'll know how many rows you have. And once you've worked 57 rows, then you can move on to the working even section. So, but here I just want to pause for just a minute to make a comment about the thickness of your yarn. So if you are substituting with a thicker yarn or a thinner yarn, you can still use the pattern as written, but you're going to have to do more rows in order for it to be long enough, right? Like if your gauge is smaller, you're just going to have to do more rows. And it's going to keep on increasing, and eventually it's going to be about 6 inches wide at the widest point, which is right in the middle here, right in the middle of your scarflet there. So you're just going to keep working a repeat of those, those 2 rows over and over and over until it's about 6 inches wide, and more importantly, until it's about 24 inches long. So what I found when I worked on the scarflet is after I blocked it, it gained about 2 inches in length, from one tip to the other. So that's why I have 24 inches instead of 25, even though the finished length of the scarf is 50. You just stop just a little bit early, just assuming that it's going to grow just a little bit in the blocking process. But really, an inch or 2 is not going to make a difference on this little scarflet. It's fine if it's a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. It's not going to cause any problems. It's very stretchy and very accommodating. All right, so after you work back and forth and your scarf has widened out a bit, let me untangle my yarn here. Here we go. Okay, so this is just a mini version of what we're making, just so that you can see a little bit better. It's not, normally you would keep going until you've worked your 57 rows, and it's about 6 inches wide and about 24 inches in length. Okay, and you're going to end. Let's see. You would end with a repeat of the treble stitches. So I'm going to back this up here a little bit. So here I've ended with a repeat of the treble stitches. And then the little section that says working even, that just means that you're just working back and forth and you're not adding any stitches, you're not increasing nor are you decreasing. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to start out with that slip stitch row. So we chain 1 and turn, and then we just do our slip stitch row like normal. So we're making a slip stitch into the back loop of each stitch across, like this. And there's our very last slip stitch. And then on row 59, we're just going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And remember that turning chain always counts as the first stitch of the row. So since we're not adding any stitches, we don't want to work our next stitch into that same first stitch. We can't, because this is counting as the first stitch. So it's like the stitch grew out of that, the very first stitch of the row. So we would work our first stitch here. But when you do that, when you're working these tall stitches, and then you count your turning chain as your first stitch. Let me just show you what this looks like. And then you make your second stitch, you can see that there's like this little window that happens here. Let me put my hand behind so you can see a little better. There's a little gap there. You can see a little hole, and that just drives me nuts. I do not like how that looks. So in order to fix that problem and still be able to count that turning chain as our first chain of the row, we are going to do something that's called a linked treble, the beginning linked treble. This is the BLT stitch I was talking about earlier. Okay, so in order to do that, we are going to pull up loops from this chain instead of doing our first 2 yarn overs. So normally when we do our treble stitch, we yarn over twice and then we make our stitch. So instead of doing any yarn overs, we're going to insert our hook into the second chain from the hook, and we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop there. And that's going to count as the first yarn over. Then we're going to insert our hook into the next chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, and that's going to count as the second yarn over. So in the treble you yarn over twice, then you make the stitch. So these are taking the places of those yarn overs. So we've got those two loops there, and now we can go ahead and work into our stitch. So remember, we're not working here, we're working here. So we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then we're going to complete our treble crochet as normal. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So what that did is it linked the stitch that I just made, that treble, into this tall chain here. Now, one thing I want to make sure I point out is that that chain is still, the top of it is still counting as a stitch, or that chain does still count as a stitch. So we're going to mark that because it is very easy to miss the top of that chain. I made a note about this even in the pattern because it's so easy to miss it. So this is counting as a stitch, and also the linked stitch is counting as a stitch. So really we have 2 stitches here already. And now we're going to work a linked treble into each stitch across. Sorry, not a linked treble, just a regular treble. The only place we're linking our stitch is at the very beginning, and it's just to kind of close in that gap between the turning chain and the first stitch of the row. And the only reason that there wasn't a gap before, you might be wondering, well, why are we all of a sudden having to do this link stitch? But we were still counting that as a stitch before. And the reason is because we were increasing there. We were putting a stitch into that same first stitch, and that fills in that little gap. So you don't need to do a link stitch up until you start working even. And then at that point, you can link it, and in that way, you don't end up with a little hole there. And you might be thinking, well, that seems like more trouble than it's worth. And that's, it's totally up to you. Maybe it doesn't bother you to have like a little bit of a gap there, and maybe that will mostly go away during the blocking. So if you don't want to do a linked stitch, you can just not even worry about it. Just make sure you're making the first stitch, first actual treble into the second stitch, because your beginning chain is still going to count as a stitch. But knowing how to make those linked stitches is a really good tool to have, because you may have come across this before with other tall stitches where you have that gap there. All right, so there is our last treble stitch, and we're going to chain one and turn. And then we're going to work those same slip stitch row that we've been working, where you make a slip stitch into each stitch across, just working through the back loop. All right, and I've got 2 more stitches, and see, it's a good thing we put our stitch marker in there so that I don't miss that very last one. It's very hard to see. Sometimes you kind of have to like pull it up a little bit there. Okay, so there we go. There is our last slip stitch of the row, and then we're going to do that one more time. So we're going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, turn our work, and we're going to begin with a beginning linked treble. So instead of yarning over, we're going to pick up a loop from the second chain from the hook and from the third chain from the hook. And then we're going to work into that second stitch. Okay, not the first one, because that turning chain counts as the first stitch. So we're going to work underneath the second stitch and complete our treble just as if it were a normal treble. And then we're going to treble crochet all the way across. So if you guys like these kind of events, if you like what you're seeing, I would encourage you guys to fill out the survey. We actually have a survey today. It's in the description. I think we'll also put it in the chat for you guys just to make it a little bit easier. If it doesn't take very long, but if you want to tell us what your experience is, if you like what you're seeing, if you have other suggestions, please fill that out, because we really do pay attention to what you guys say. We want to make things that you guys want to see, and I am excited to learn what you guys like about what we're doing so far, so we keep doing those things. And if you guys have any other suggestions, I'm all ears. So please fill out the survey. We would really, really appreciate it. All right, so here I am nearing the end of my row. I got one more treble here. And then we just continue with that slip stitch row. So the slip stitch row is basically the same all the way through the whole scarf, whether you're increasing or whether you're working even or whether you're decreasing. So it's just the same. You're just always going to be making a slip stitch through that back loop, one stitch into each stitch across. And don't forget to work that slip stitch into the top of your turning chain also. All right, so so now I want to show you guys how to work the decrease section, okay? Because in the middle of your scarflet, there's only really 4 rows of working even. So that means you're not increasing or decreasing. You're just doing that for 4 rows, just maintaining your stitch count. And then after that, you're going to start decreasing. This is kind of like a very long, stretched out, smooth diamond shape is kind of what this is. There's probably a better geometric term for this, but yeah, you can put that in the chat and teach me about geometry. I don't really, it basically just is very narrow, comes out, and then goes back in. All right, so to do the decreasing rows, we are going to start out the same. So we're going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we're going to turn our work. And that first beginning chain is still counting as a stitch throughout this whole project. It will always count as a stitch. The first stitch we're going to do is a linked treble. So this is the beginning linked treble. This is just like what we did on the work and even section. So we're going to pull up a loop from the second chain from the hook and pull up a loop from the third chain from the hook. And we're going to skip that very first stitch and work underneath the second stitch. And we're going to complete our treble stitch. So yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So here we have 2 stitches. So we've got that beginning chain counts as a stitch, and we have that BLT, the beginning linked treble, that counts as a stitch as well. And now the next 2 stitches that we're going to work into are going to be decreased into 1 stitch. So normally when we make decreases in treble crochet, we will yarn over twice, and then we insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then we stop, and then we yarn over twice again, insert, yarn, and then yarn up and yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and stop. So basically we're doing the beginnings of 2 treble crochets, and then we yarn over, and then we pull through all 3 to finish that off, which looks fine. And there's nothing wrong with this way of decreasing. I just find that my eye is a little, like it bulges out just a little bit, and my eye is kind of drawn to it a little bit. So I started decreasing my trebles in a different way, and I've never seen anyone do this. I'm sure other people must do this, because in crochet, anytime you feel like you invented a new thing, like it's very likely other people have been doing it for a long time and you just don't know about it. That's what I found anyway, but this is the version that I like of making a treble decrease. So I will yarn over twice, just like I'm starting a regular treble. I insert into the next stitch. I yarn over and pull up a loop. I yarn over and I pull through 2, and right there I stop, okay? And then I yarn over once, and then I insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and I stop. And then I yarn over and I pull through 3 loops, and then I yarn over and pull through 2 loops. And so what that does is it connects the stitches together a little lower. Before, the stitches were almost full treble crochets, and then they were just connected together at the very top. So this makes it a little bit less bulky up here, and I think because of that, it seems to sit a little flatter or something. So I have started doing my treble decreases in this way. So it might be fun for you to try it out. I do have the instructions for how to do this decrease within the pattern if you need some reminders when you get to this project, because it's a lot to take in. Of course, you can always watch this video over and over again, later on to figure out what I'm doing here. But I'll show you this a couple more times. But having said all that, if you are really just like, Brenda, I don't need to do another complicated treble decrease. I'm happy with the treble decrease I already know. That's totally fine, and it's not going to be a problem. I just thought it might be interesting for you guys to learn a different way to do it and to see what I've been doing lately. So, okay, so I'm going to fill up the rest of my row here with a treble crochet into each stitch across, like that. Just one, no more increases or decreases. I'm just doing 1 stitch into each stitch, making trebles under both loops just as we normally have been in this stitch pattern. Christy is asking if there's an easy way to ball up a hank. So, if the easiest way is if you already have a ball winder and, oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on what they're called. A Swift and a ball winder. So the Swift is kind of like that. A lot of times they're made out of wood, but they could be made out of other things. But it's almost sort of like an umbrella structure that you can open up to whatever the circumference of your hank is. You just kind of pop it open and then set your hank around it. And it rotates very easily. If you pull on the yarn, it should spin. So, and then you can make a ball off of that. So you don't have to have the ball winder. You can make the ball with your hands, and that Swift will just kind of rotate around and allow you to make the ball. Or you can also get a ball winder and run it through there, and then you just have a little crank and it winds it up for you. However, not everybody has one of those or wants to buy one of those, and especially if this is like your first time using a hand-dyed yarn. I'm very glad that you asked this question also, because I should have addressed this, because there's probably a lot of people who have never encountered, working from this type of yarn, or this put up. That's what they call the style of how the yarn is wound. So if you don't have that, what you can do is you can put two backs of chairs together and kind of move them apart from each other a little bit so that it's the right distance for your yarn to sit around the backs of the chairs. I usually do this on my couch. If I don't want to get out my Swift and ball winder, I do this on my couch and I prop my knees up, and then I will put the hank around my knees, just because you have to. Let me just open this up. You really have to have something that's going to be going through the middle of this loop here and hanging, holding it in place as you wind off of this. Otherwise, it's going to get tangled and it's going to be extremely frustrating. And I don't want you to have a frustrating experience. So I will sit on the couch and prop my knees up. There's actually a video of this on the Creative Crochet Corner website. It's called I think it's called Winding a Ball Without a Swift or something like that. But I'm sitting here in the chair with my knees propped up, and then I put the loop around my knees, and then I'm able to wind off of that. But for some people that might be kind of a mobility issue, being able to put your knees up like that. But if you have just like a friend who can hold their arms like this, or like I said, two backs of chairs. I've also even done this, if you're careful, you can do this by just hanging it on a doorknob. You can just hang the loop over your doorknob and just take the time to figure out where exactly the yarn is coming from. Like, don't pull the yarn through, how do I explain this? When you do this, there's one area where the yarn ends begin, and then you're going to just start winding from that point. There's just, like a beginning and an end, right? So you're gonna just be kind of careful and arrange your loop of yarn when you put it on that doorknob and hang it, so that way you're pulling from the outside of your hank of yarn. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope I answered your question. But yes, you cannot just work directly from that, because it's going to tangle. You really have to put it into a ball or cake or whatever before you start working from it. All right, so I've got 2 more stitches left here. 2 more trebles. There's 1. And 2. Okay, and then you would chain 1 and turn. Actually, I'll show you that decrease one more time. So I'll just work my way across here, just how we always do on those slip stitch rows. We're just slip stitching through that back loop all the way across. So we're only decreasing on every other row, and that's going to mirror the increases that happened on every other row on the way, from the beginning of the scarflet to the middle. And now we're working that second half of the scarflet. All right, so we're going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, turn our work. And then we're going to start with the beginning linked treble. So we pull up a strand of yarn from the second chain from the hook and one from the third chain from the hook. and then we skip that very first stitch and make our next stitch into the second stitch of the row. So yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that counts as the first 2 stitches of the row. And now we're going to do our decrease. So we're going to yarn over twice, just like we're starting a normal treble. And we go into the next stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then we stop at that point. Let me just pull this out. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so it's called the modified treble crochet 2 stitches together. This is this section right at the top of page 6. That is where I'm working this stitch. I just wanted to point that out in case you needed the written version of it later. Okay, so let me start that over because there was a little, in case we had a break in conversation, concentration. So we're gonna yarn over twice, insert our hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and stop. Then we yarn over once and work into the next stitch, the following stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and stop. Then we're going to yarn over and we're going to pull through 3 stitches, or 3 loops, 1, 2, 3 loops. And then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Okay, so that is my modified treble crochet decrease there. Modified treble crochet 2 together. That's a mouthful. All right, so then you just continue working your treble crochet stitches all the way across, working your slip stitches on your way back, and you just do that until you decrease it pretty much down to nothing. So I want to show you the last couple of rows because they're a little bit different. The last couple rows of after decreasing. So here is, if you have worked this for a long time, we started out here, increase, 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 and we got to the middle, which is about here, 6 inches wide. We worked a couple, 4 rows just without increasing or decreasing. And then here are our decreases, decrease, decrease, decrease to the other end. And I'm gonna place my hook here. So let's see, what did I just finish doing? A slip stitch row. Gotta untangle myself. There we go. Oh, Leslie Lewis is saying, hi from Shelbyville, Illinois. It's windy and warm today. It was windy and warm here yesterday, or was that the day before? Both days, kind of. It's been very warm. And they like my method of decreasing the treble stitch. Thank you. Yeah, you guys should try it out. It's something different, and it's nice and compact, and it doesn't leave a gap there between, like sometimes when you do that decrease, it kind of makes, I don't know, it just seems a little bit more visible. Okay, so let's see where we're at. We're going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're still doing another decrease row here. So we're going to pull up a loop from the second chain, pull up a loop from the third chain, and then we're going to work into that second stitch and complete our treble crochet. So we've got 2 stitches here. And then we're going to do a decrease here. So we yarn over twice, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over once, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, then yarn over, pull through 3, and yarn over, pull through 2. And now we've got 3 stitches left. So we'll make those treble stitches in each of the last 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3, and then we're going to chain 1 and turn and work those slip stitches through the back loop all the way across. There we go. And chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Turn our work. And we're going to begin with our beginning linked treble. So that's right here. And now we're going to do a decrease stitch right here. So yarn over twice. So these are still So far, it's exactly the same as I was showing you for the decrease rows, but we are getting close to where there's a little bit of an anomaly. So we will get to that, I think, on the next row. And then here's our last 2 stitches. Chain 1 and turn. And we're going to do those slip stitches through the back loop. And don't forget to slip stitch into your turning chain. And chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to begin with our beginning linked treble. Oh, I think we have to go one more row before it gets different. Here's our beginning linked treble. And here is our decrease. There we go. And then we have one more treble here. So next row we're going to run out of regular trebles to do, which is fine. That's how the pattern's written. We're going to chain 1 and turn and slip stitch through the back loop across. We've got 4 slip stitches here. And let me check in the pattern what row we're on. Okay, so if you, actually 2 things. If you kind of mess around with the gauge here and you are, using a thicker yarn or a thinner yarn, so you're not doing the same amount of rows, then you will just keep decreasing until you get to where you have 4 stitches remaining after working an odd numbered row. So the odd numbered rows are the treble rows. The even number rows are the slip stitch rows. So let's see. Yep. So that would have been on our very last row. We had 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. We had 4 trebles on the last, or 4 stitches on the last row, and that was a repeat of of an odd row. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, regardless of whether you are following this pattern to a T, or whether you just kind of are repeating those rows, doing increases until you feel like it's about half as long as you want the scarflet, you do a couple of rows of working even, and then you do your decreases. You just can keep repeating those, decreasing every other row until you end up with 4 stitches, 4 tall stitches. Then after that, you're going to do a repeat, which we just did, of working those slip stitches through the back loop, okay? So now we have 4 slip stitches, and then at this point, this is where you can kind of refer back to these directions. So this will be called row 115. If you were following my pattern exactly with the same amount of rows, this would be 115. But if you changed it up and have a different gauge and you're doing fewer or more rows, don't worry about the row number there. Just start following the directions at that point. So we're going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to do our beginning linked treble into that next stitch. So that would be right here. There's our beginning linked treble. And then we only have 2 stitches left. So we're going to do our decrease, our modified treble 2 together. There's our decrease right there. And then we don't have any more room for any more treble stitches. That was it. We ended with that decrease. So then we're going to repeat row 62, which means that we are just doing our slip stitch row. That's all that means. So we only have 3 stitches here. Don't forget that turning chain. We're just slip stitching in 3 stitches. And then we're going to chain 4 and turn. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to turn our work. This is where we're at right here. So we're going to do basically we're doing the same kind of beginning linked treble, but we're going to do a decrease. okay? So over the second and third stitches. So we're gonna pull up a loop here, just like, this is like just like the regular beginning linked treble. Pull up a loop here, and then we're going to insert our hook into that second stitch and pull up a loop. Then we're gonna yarn over, and we're gonna pull through 2. And then at this point, you can decide, actually, I'm gonna do it exactly how I have the stitch written, because you can do your decrease as though you were doing a regular treble decrease, or you could do it like a modified treble decrease. But I'm gonna show you exactly how here we go, how I wrote out the directions here, just to make sure. It doesn't really matter either way, but okay, let's see. Insert hook into the third chain from the, into the chain, yep, we already did that. Yarn up and drop a loop, and then we insert our hook into the following stitch. We already did that. Yarn up and pull up a loop. So we had 4, and then yarn over, pull through 2 loops on the hook. Then you have 3 loops on the hook. That's right where we're at. Yarn over, insert into the following stitch. Okay, so I wrote this section just like we were doing a modified treble decrease. I'm gonna back up here just to make sure that I'm not losing you guys here. So this is in the same like style as I've been doing those modified treble decreases, except the only difference is we're just linking it to this chain. So we're gonna pull up a loop in the second chain, pull up a loop in the third chain, and then we're gonna pull up a loop in that second stitch, just like that, yarn over and pull through 2. Then we yarn over once, insert into the following stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then we stop there. Then we yarn over, pull through 3, yarn over, and pull through 2. Okay, so I just also want to note too, if this is like getting too confusing with all these special little stitches, the only reason I'm doing these special little stitches is to make the tip of this scarflet look really nice and solid and not have like gaps between the stitches. I just liked how it looked better this way. But if this is just seems overwhelming, if you're like a newer crocheter and you're like, oh, like that's too much, really you can just do a regular treble crochet decrease right there. You don't need to link it if you don't want to. It's perfectly fine to substitute there. All right, so the next row, I think we're just doing, we're repeating row 62, which just means we're doing a slip stitch row. So we're just doing a slip stitch into the back loop of each of those 2 stitches. That's it. And then we're gonna chain 1, and this is how we end off by doing a half double crochet 2 together. Then it's gonna match the beginning tip. So we yarn over, and then we insert into this stitch here, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then we're gonna yarn over, insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, then we're gonna yarn over and pull through all those loops for a nice solid end there. And then we can finish off by just cutting our yarn and drawing it through like that. So you can see this fabric does have a little bit of a tendency to curl just a little bit on the end. See, it wants to kind of twist around like that, but that will be fixed with a little bit of blocking. So, looks like we've got a hi from Georgia, from Beverly. I like the look of the scarflet. Can't wait to get my thread. Awesome, I'm glad you like it. Okay, so the last step, and I would highly recommend blocking this. I mean, yes, you're gonna tie it around your neck. Maybe it doesn't really matter that much, but when I blocked it, I just felt like the yarn is even more soft than it was before. I don't wanna insinuate that this is like a scratchy yarn, because it is not. This is wool, and it's very soft. It was soft enough for me to wear it against my neck. But I just felt like the soaking it and blocking it just really made it relax and kind of plump up a little bit. I definitely would recommend that. And also this fabric, you can see it just wants to curl just a little bit. When I just set it down, you can see it wants to curl up a little bit. And that will get rid of that. You know, you can see how this is just very flat. It's not doing that curling thing that the other one is doing, and it's only because it's been blocked. The other little note I had about the blocking is that this fabric, just because of the anatomy of the stitches, it does have a tendency to kind of twist just ever so slightly. So this would be like straight up and down, and you can see the stitches are kind of leaning a little bit, but when you get it wet and you block it, you can fix that very easily. You know, just kind of pull it into shape like that. You can just shape it with your hands and then let it dry like that, and it'll be fine. So I definitely recommend the blocking. But like I said before, you're gonna twist it around and tie it on, and I mean, you know, maybe it doesn't matter that much. So let me just show you what this looks like when you tie it on. So you just when you want to tie it on, just find the widest point, you know, where you worked even, and that's gonna go kind of, I like to wear it with the knot kind of off to the side. Actually, maybe I'll just do it on myself. But if you kind of put this on so that the longest part, the center of it, is just off to the side of your neck here, like that, and then you can wrap both, I'm gonna pull my hair out of the way here, wrap both ends around to the front, and they kind of just go on top of the scarf and tie right on top of it. So just like this, and give it a little knot. And I like to, you know, tie it twice here, and not tie it super tightly, but like tightly enough that it'll stay. And it just looks like that. Super cute, right? And it's, the thing I like about it is that it stays out of your way when you're doing stuff. And it's nice, but just keep you warm, you know, up against your neck like that. It does actually make a difference. It's nice, and it's very soft. And I love it. And I hope you guys do too. I hope you guys have enjoyed this tutorial, and just, I want to mention one more time, in case you didn't fill out the survey, please fill out the survey and let us know how we're doing. We really want to know, you know, what it is that you guys like, if there's anything we should be changing. It does make a difference. We are looking forward to finding out what you guys think, so that we can make content that you guys enjoy more. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in my next live. Bye, everybody.